Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Thank you to our kind moderator, Prof. Noorjahan. And thank you to everyone for listening to UM breakfast session. This morning, I feel honored to be given the chance to talk about and to share our thoughts on simulation in medical education based on our UM experience. When we talk about simulation, right, we want to know what is it all about. It's actually a method. Basically, it's the technique or method so that we can experience near real event without going through the harms and complications associated with it, as we can see later on. So it's a method or technique that is used to produce an experience without going through the real events or any harms associated with it. Just to highlight that preventable medical errors have resulted in significant mortality and morbidities. These are preventable, means we can provide training to our healthcare personnel to minimize these errors. And here comes the role of simulation in providing and equipping our healthcare personnel with specific skills in order to reduce medical errors. When we talk about simulation, right, why is there a need for simulation in medical education? It's because by conducting simulation, we can provide what we call as a safe and controlled environment to learn certain things. We can also equip our trainees with a certain level of competencies, skill, up to a certain standards that we want. For instance, right, we wouldn't want our trainees to be doing first time doing IV insertion, central line insertion, chest tube insertion, because they are all associated with potential complications. So for such scenario, we can do what we call as part task training, where we have specific mannequin to train our trainees doing certain procedures. The other advantage of doing simulation is we can tailor whether the scenarios, tailor the mannequin and whatnot to a level appropriate to the expertise that we want to aim. Also, simulation can be used to train in what we call as high-risk condition. Let's say we want to create a simulation in crisis management, so we can get our trainees to better equip when the actual crisis happens. So simulation has been in practice for quite some time. It started in aviation industry. From simulation, we have significantly managed to reduce numbers of incidents, accidents, errors. So it's time that medical education also incorporates simulation in medical education. So simulation in medical education has been firstly used. One of the earliest simulation is in delivery of normal deliveries using what we call as very low fidelity mannequin here, as you can see here, teaching the midwives and those involved in obstetric gynecologists on how to deliver safely and perform episiotomy and whatnot. And the one that we commonly use is this resuscitation in the basic life support and the advanced cardiac life support. We use this mannequin to practice on the CPR. So with the rapid involvement of simulation, we can see that simulation has been incorporated in our medical education, medical examination as well. For instance, we have been doing this OSCE or objective structured clinical examination as part of the examination. So we can see that simulation has been accepted as a somewhat in medical education and training. So when we talk about simulation and applying it in medical education, we need to know why is it important. Before going to that topic, just to highlight, just to throw some question. Is the traditional apprenticeship model or teaching method has become obsolete with simulation? We oftentimes the traditional methods of learning in medical is to what we call as apprenticeship model, whereby we see once, we do under supervision once, and we do on ourselves once. But this practicing directly or hands-on directly towards patient, there are potential harm, potential complications associated with it, and can be very psychological trauma, not only to the patient, but to also to our trainees. And this contradicts the principle of first doing no harm in our healthcare professional medical conduct. So this is where simulation comes into place. The question is, can really simulation replace the apprenticeship or traditional model? Let's talk about it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, simulation training aims to provide a safe environment and condition so that our trainees can learn without harming a patient. So we can adjust the simulation scenarios and simulation training based on the level of expertise that we are expected of them. So it's very adjustable. We can tailor to whatever knowledge and skills that we want to impart on. It's important that like for instance, crisis management using simulation is very important so that when they are faced with a real crisis, they can be very familiar. They can be very familiarized with the management algorithm as well. Again, simulation has been incorporated in medical education. Part of it is in OSCE. So the means of doing it in simulation with the aim of overcoming the variability of the scenarios. With using simulation, we can conduct what we call as very standardized slots, very reproducible slots. We can not only, when we talk about simulation, not all about mannequin, we can also use standardized patients who are trained actors to simulate particular clinical cases. Therefore, having a standardized assessment, we can assess the performance and competencies of our trainees. More importantly, in simulation is not so much on the knowledge that we can learn in class or in lectures, but more importantly, focusing on the training of what we call as non-technical skills. For instance, we can't learn about how to work in a team, how to communicate well, unless we do it ourselves. So simulation plays a role in this, that we can observe and we can practice how to be a good team member, how to effectively communicate well, how to conduct professional manners and how to manage crisis accordingly. Yes, mistakes do happen, but it's better to have mistakes happening during simulation rather than in actual real crisis or real scenario. When we talk about simulation, right, there are various modalities involved in conducting simulation. Not only is mannequin, even in Mannequin itself, we have from low technology to the high-end technology. We can cost near 500,000 or so. We can have screen-based computer simulators. We can have standardized patient, actors. We can have what we call as complex task trainer, specific many parts of mannequin, like to practice on centerline insertion, for instance. We can also have a realistic patient simulator. So just to promote a bit on, just to highlight a bit that we have this Malaysian Society for Simulation in the Healthcare in Malaysia, where we gather all the simulation enthusiasts to share their expertise and share the resources in our country. Of course, there are challenges involved in conducting simulation. Cost of setting up simulation can be high, but as I mentioned earlier, not necessarily that simulation requires all the high-end or high fidelity mannequin. We can also conduct it with lower resource setting. Of course, it requires training of staff, how to conduct not only the scenarios, but also the discussion and facilitation after the scenarios in simulation, and possible resistance in those who feels that simulation training may not result in a good outcome. So our simulation teams consists of our Prof and myself, a team of simulation team. Here we have Prof. Fidel, Prof. Hashim, and Prof. Jahan is also in our simulation team, supported by all the other clinical specialists mentioned here. Our activities in simulation involve mainly in not only among the medical student conducting simulation for crisis management. We also have been involved in simulation workshop involving other hospitals as well. We collaborate with other hospitals to conduct a workshop in crisis management and sharing of our expertise and provide assistance to other centers to set up simulation. So this is our UMFP simulation. Normally once a week we have a session with the medical undergrads, mainly doing on the crisis management involving airway management, hypovolemic or septic shock management in crisis, particularly looking at how well the non-technical skills in this simulation session. So far, we've been getting a lot of positive feedback from the medical students, and it's very encouraging as well. This is a workshop that we had conducted last year during the Malaysian Society of Anesthesia pre-congress workshop. We had a very interactive anesthetic crisis management workshop. There's a team behind the scene, as you can see here. We have mannequin and our team members playing the specific role in the simulation. Here, the mannequin that we have here are considered high fidelity, very high end. The first mannequin here can even deliver the baby on its own. We can program the mannequin to do such thing. And the second mannequin here is also high fidelity in a way that we can adjust the difficulty in ventilation, difficulty in intubation. The pupils can give reflexes to light. And then our mannequin here, the third one is pediatric mannequin. Some high fidelity mannequin, they can provide like lung auscultation, providing additional sound, even can groan and moan or shout, etc., etc. So as the technology advances, high-end mannequin can become really advanced. But we try to mimic the real scenario, so much so that even the medication we construct to be similar to the to real clinical practice here. There's some pictures with the participants of the workshop. We had conducted other training workshop all over the country. One of it was in Sarawak. This was also last year. We conducted a training of trainers. Means we train the specialists, those who are going to conduct the simulation workshop themselves later on. So when we talk about training of trainers, what exactly that we conduct is that we provide a guide to them of how not only to create a scenario, what are the things that required to set up the simulation. We also focus on the skills of doing facilitation and conducting debriefing. So with the hope that they can conduct the workshop themselves. So most of the time is 2-day course. The first day is we train the trainers. The second day involve them conducting the scenarios under supervision and with co-facilitation from the facilitators. So simulation for anesthetic crisis workshop. So the participants involved from medical officers, nurses, from anesthetic medical assistants. So they give what we call as immersive or realistic healthcare medical simulation. So we use not necessarily just mannequin, we can use real actors as well. We can use in a low resource setting, even we can use a very simple mannequin. We incorporate with a monitor that we can turn it into vital signs monitor using free application. Again, some pictures about Sarawak simulation crisis management we had conducted. As I mentioned earlier, not necessary that we require high fidelity or high-end mannequin. We can just make do with whatever resources available. What more important in simulation is that the skills of the facilitation. Doesn't matter, you can have a lot of high fidelity mannequin, but you have a very poor facilitation or debriefing skills, and it wouldn't result in a good outcome. So depending on the objective of our simulation technique, so it will reflect on what mannequin to use. Even the high-end mannequin may not achieve certain objectives. In fact, a standardized patient would be better in simulating particular clinical cases, for instance. Another picture of our simulation workshop. The most recent one, simulation workshop that we had conducted was in February and July. February was in Hospital Shah Alam. Same, we conducted training of trainers on day 1, and then workshop on day 2 involving medical officers. So the first day will include training the specialists, and the second day conducting on medical officers. We'll talk a bit on debriefing skills. Prior to have this trainers to conduct themselves, we get them to experience the immersive nature of the crisis to see how they perform under pressure. It's very, you can really feel the pressure when we are involved in the crisis scenario itself. So for this, yeah, we want to not only create a safe learning environment in the crisis management, but also we want to see how well they work as a teamwork, they work in a team, and how well they communicate, and how is the professionalism during the crisis. So in our simulation training of trainers, we get them to play that. They can become a co-facing. Then once they're more comfortable, they can conduct with help of other facilitators as well. Most importantly is to learn how the facilitation points is conducted and how to perform what we call as debriefing skills. So even though we've been using the same scenarios, a lot of time the learning outcome is different because everyone reacts differently. Here is just a monitor, the three apps that we use. We put on a tablet or other LCD monitors to display the vital signs. So it's very useful in a lower resource setting. Yeah, like I said, no point having simulation if there's no proper facilitation or debriefing. We want to focus mainly on a no blame technique. We want the participant to reflect on what were the things that they could have improved further. Even if there's any mistake that happened, we want to point out in such a way without putting the blame on them. So for instance, instead of saying, why did you do such and such, it's not the correct thing to do. That's our usual practice, right? So probably a good idea to fine tune it in such a way that maybe you can say, I noticed you did such and such, try to understand any reasons behind it. It could be because of the simulation, the briefing on the simulation was not done properly. The mannequin or certain information are not apparent. That's why our trainer or the participant acted in such a way. So seek to understand them to be understood. So the aim of debriefing is mainly a reflection of what they can learn from the scenario, what would have been better. No finger pointings and will allow venting. Some participants they may end up feel like very frustrated or not. We allow them to vent out, and we don't want it can be very psychological, traumatizing to the participant if we don't conduct debriefing correctly. So one of the way is to ensure no condescending manner in conducting debriefing. Just to highlight that it should be a judgmental, free, and open session, so that when the environment is very positive and very safe, we produce a more wonderful conversation. Okay. Again, just to show the importance of debriefing in clinical simulation, with the hope that a good debriefing can result in a good outcome. A poor debriefing may result, regardless of very high fidelity, high-end mannequin, if it's not conducted properly, it won't be of any good outcome. Just to share some events that occurred in workshop in Hospital Shah Alam. Some mannequin we even MacGyver it in such a way that so much so that in a lower resource setting we can tweak here and there to mimic a real real experience. Some of simulation came like the hospital Shah Alam, and then the secondly involved medical officers in the whole participant. And then the most recent one that we had was in Hospital Seberang Jaya, whereby again we had a training of trainers workshop on day one and the simulation on of crisis management on day two. So in conclusion, simulation in medical education has been shown to be able to provide a safe learning environment whereby we can focus more on the non-technical skills that we can't learn in lecture. For instance, applying it, how to be a good team leader, how to work well in a team, how to have a good conduct of professionalism, and have a good practice of communication skills. So again, just to emphasize, can be done successfully even in a low resource setting. We can tweak here and there. The most important thing aspect would be not so much on the mannequin. There's several other modalities, as I mentioned earlier, for simulation. But most importantly is how we conduct the scenarios to be near real as possible. And the most important aspect as well is the facilitation point, or the skills of facilitators in conducting briefing after the simulation scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronny. I think there are some questions in the Q&A box. Thank you, Prof. Waiki, for the question. So Prof. Waiki highlighted that high fidelity models attempt to resemble as closely as possible to the real situation. Yep. And so the question was, for those of us in unconscious competency, we derive most of the information in a crisis situation via our unconscious brain. How do we overcome this problem for those of us in the state that even high fidelity models cannot substitute for? So Ronny, would you like to answer the question? You found. Ronny, can you hear me?
Sorry, Prof.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Okay, so there's a question. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a bit, but still.
All right. So the question you can open in the Q&A box. So basically, Prof. YK is asking, for those of us in unconscious competency, we derive most of the information in the crisis situation via our unconscious brain. So how do we overcome this problem for those of us in that state that even high fidelity models cannot substitute for?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prof. YK, for very excellent question. Quite challenging to answer the question as well. So yeah, I agree. Even a high fidelity model cannot substitute for such a scenario. Most importantly is the applying to conducting the simulation scenario. We get the participants to be brief about what are the limitations of the mannequins, what are the information that they can provide, and also to get them to be open to any feedbacks, so that because every participant they react differently in even in the same crisis simulation scenario. So as long as the participants they are open and they're willing to discuss and they reflect on what occurred during the simulation, probably that could tackle on the unconscious part of certain manners in the crisis management.
Thank you, Ronnie. If I may add to that, basically, the other important point is about the facilitation and the debriefing. It's about making the unconscious conscious again. So maybe take a step back and go through and reflect together. So debriefing is facilitated reflection. So this will actually help to make things that are unconscious a bit more conscious. So that reflection in action and on action during the briefing would be very helpful. So I hope that answers your question. And the other question about how the airline industry overcomes it, I wonder too. So next time, maybe we can ask our pilot friends. Thanks, Prof. So I'm sorry we have run out of time. So I will hand over to the next moderator to introduce our next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.